I'm just outside of Cusco right now, and I'm heading to Cusco, which is at 11,000 feet. So I'm getting an oxygen dose because I'm heading to the airport, and I'm telling you, it is hard to breathe there. Anyway, today I'm flying from Cusco to Lima on an Airbus A320 of LATAM, and you're coming with me. Before I get into how I felt in the high altitude zones of Peru, make sure you check out the video I posted before this one of my flight from Lima to Cusco. It was an insane approach at a high altitude over a densely populated area with mountains all around. Today, we'll be climbing through this area. And before I take you to the airport, here are a few images of Cusco. It's a vibrant and fascinating city, and it's very much worth visiting if you can handle the high altitude. Cusco was the base for my visit to Machu Piccchu, which was an out-of-this-world place to explore. Amazing. But it wasn't all fun and excitement for me. Just a few hours after I had landed a few days prior to this, I started to get a headache. It seemed like a standard headache, but it just would not go away. I took ibuprofen, which I normally take for headaches, and it just didn't work. Recalling that I was at a high altitude, I went to the hotel lobby for help, and they took my pulse ox level. It was at 78%. It should be between 95 and 100%. The hotel offered me oxygen for free, and the headache went away immediately, and my levels returned to normal. It's expected for that most people visiting high altitudes like that, pulse ox levels will go down, but not that low. Even locals have pulse ox levels below 95%, but that's normal for them. Every day, several times a day, I had to go to the hotel lobby to get oxygen to cure my altitude sickness. I only needed it while at the higher altitudes in Cusco, and one of the hotels I stayed at was pretty high up, so I needed it often. I need to get back to sea level, but before heading to the Cusco airport, I spent some time in Urubamba, which is to the northwest of Cusco. As an aviation enthusiast, I'm always looking up, and I spotted this LATAM A320 around 25,000 feet flying on the route that I'm about to take you on, Cusco to Lima. Here's another one on the same route. Even though these planes are around 25,000 feet up, it appears that they're only at 15,000 feet since the ground level is at 10,000 feet. Before we head on over to the airport, here's a message from this video's sponsor. I had spent a great day at the beach, and as the sun set, I drove away, but I realized that I had left my wallet behind. While this is unsettling, I was confident because I have an extra wallet with a tracker, so I used my phone to locate the wallet. My tracker says that it's right here on the beach. Using the Find My app on my phone, I'm walking in the exact direction I need to go to find my cool wallet, which is compact, has space for plenty of cards, and blocks RFID to prevent wireless theft. And with the tracker that I added to it, I know it'll never get lost. I found my extra wallet! I'm so happy I found my wallet. You know, it can be quite intimidating when you're at the beach trying to find something, but with my extra wallet and tracker, it made everything so easy. Now, if you're interested in an extra product, like a wallet or a tracker, there's a link in the description below. Click on the link and enter code MASELLA for savings. That's MASELLA. Now let's head back to Peru. On my way to the Cusco airport, I passed by a new airport that's being built to the northwest to replace it. It's at an altitude even higher than the current airport, but there's less terrain around it. As my flight from Lima approached the old Cusco airport, I was able to see this new airport from the sky. We're getting close to the city of Cusco, and I'm strategically seated on the left side of my ride to see the long runway at the old airport as we descend on a mountain on the western side of the airport. Because of the mountain we're on here, flights only operate in airspace on the opposite side of the airport, so arrivals land to the west and departures take off to the east on this single runway airport. That's the runway down there. Because the airport elevation is 10,860 feet above sea level, the runway is really long at 11,146 feet. A great length like that is needed with the thin air up here. We're looking at an airport wall here at 10,860 feet. I'm feeling okay since I took some oxygen just before the ride here. Again, a seat on the left provides a nice view of the local air traffic control tower. CORPAC on the tower stands for Peruvian Corporation of Commercial Airports and Aviation. It's the airport operator for several airports in Peru. As I'm getting ready for my LATAM flight, I'm greeted by a welcome sign indicating the airport is named after Alejandro Velasco Astete. He was the first person to fly over the Andes and landed right here in Cusco from Lima in 1925. Let's head inside. And now it's time to check in for the flight to Lima. Today I'm flying on LATAM for the Delta miles as I'm getting closer to million miler status with Delta, and every mile counts. It was great to see that Delta medallions could check in a special area. After dropping off my bag, I worked my way from the land side to the air side in this small airport. Only 10 destinations are offered, but the airport handled 3 million passengers last year. Lima, my destination, is the most popular. Gates on the lower level led to remote parking stands for boarding, and down here is the airport's only lounge, which can be accessed with a fee. Today, I'm on flight 2010. Before boarding, I got to see a LATAM A319 promoting the Ancash region of Peru. Here's the front of my A320, and here's the back of my A320. Let's head on down the jet bridge to board this Lima-bound plane. Okay, I'm on board the LATAM A320. I'm in 27A, which is the same exact seat that I sat in on the flight to Cusco. It's got a very well-aligned window. That's what's most important. Who needs extra legroom or hot meals when you've got a window? From here, I can see so much, like this JetSmart A320. From here, they offer service to Lima and Arequipa, but I'm looking out for an Avianca plane on runway 10 about to lift off for La Paz in Bolivia. Here it comes. I'm interested in watching its slower than normal climb, as there are less air molecules here above 10,000 feet. We'll be doing the same thing real soon. The climb continues in a valley with mountains on both sides. This is going to be an exciting departure. Here on the ground, many planes are getting ready for departure. There's our plane and the Ancash A319 next door, where cargo loading has been completed. Soon, this JetSmart A320, featuring a lesser horned owl, which can be found in South America, will be taking off. I'm glad I got to see so many planes because when I landed, I only saw one other plane on the ramp. There goes another departure, and it's high altitude, slow climb off of runway 10. Can't wait to get there. We're now pushing back onto the small airline terminal ramp, leaving the Ancash A319 behind. Soon we'll be taxiing under our own power to runway 10. It's a busy period here in Cusco, and the JetSmart A320 that we saw a few moments ago has also pushed back and is ready for taxi. There are a lot of planes taking off right now, but they simply can't take off when they're ready. Departures must be coordinated between arrivals since this is a single runway airport, but it's a little more complicated than most airports since this is a one-direction airport, meaning that only the airspace on one side, the eastern side of the airport, can be used. Did you see those departing planes? Well, they used runway 10, and arrivals are only authorized to land on the same runway, but from the opposite direction. That's runway 28. That means that if a plane is taking off on runway 10, no airplanes can land or be on approach to runway 28 since the runway 10 departure airspace occupies runway 28's airspace for several miles in a valley. Arrivals, of course, should be prioritized over departures since they do need to land, so no aircraft can use runway 10 for takeoff, not only if a plane is on approach to runway 28, but also if that arrival is in the vicinity, like on a left base leg, because they will need to turn onto the approach course, and of course you can't have a plane climbing in a slow climb in its path. Therefore, air traffic controllers need to assess the arrival situation before any plane can take off. I really encourage you to watch the video I put out before this one that depicts an arriving flight that I took to Cusco, where we land on runway 28 after making left turns to the runway, of course with no airplanes taking off on runway 10. Today, after takeoff, we'll be making a left turn after takeoff to the north, so we don't interfere with airplanes turning from the south in a left traffic pattern to runway 28. Most of the traffic at this airport is to and from Lima, which is to the northwest. We've begun our taxi under our own power and are lined up at the taxiway ahead of us to leave the ramp. We'll be in the air in about 5 minutes, and the next arriving flight will land in about 15 minutes, so there's sufficient time for us to take off. We won't stop moving at all while taxiing to the runway. The arriving airplane is approaching from the southwest, and we'll actually see it later when we climb out to the northwest. Remember, arrivals stay south of the airport and departures stay north and only share the airspace at the airport's east side. I'm strategically seated on the left side of the plane so we can see the airport as we turn around to the north and then west. I'm also very excited about the fact that the parallel taxiway to runway 10 runs up against the Velasco Astete neighborhood of Cusco right here on the southwest side of the airport. The parallel taxiway is only needed on this side of the airport since the other side of the airport is used for the runway where planes are either touching down or rotating for their climb. There's no need for a taxiway there. On the other side of this wall is a street called Daniel Estrada Perez, which parallels the runway and taxiway. I absolutely love a dense urban area right up against an airport. Who would love to live on the upper floors of some of those buildings with those amazing airport views? Cusco has extremely limited real estate and is very, very dense, with an airport placed right in the middle of the city in the only place possible where there's flat land for a long runway, so this is why we're so close to these buildings. The building with the arched roof is a gym, and just past that is an outdoor park. The buildings house various businesses, offices, and restaurants serving local cuisine. There's really a little bit of everything right outside the airport, not to mention all of the other things there are to do in this city. Beyond the buildings, you can see the mountains on the south side of the city. The city's buildings end at those mountains, and as we'll make a U-turn on the runway, you'll see how close the mountains are on the north side. Like the runway, this is an east-west town. It's a lot longer than it is wider, and it all has to do with the restrictive mountains. The taxiway ahead of us continues ahead to the end of the airport. However, moving forward it's closed, so we have to turn to the right and taxi onto the runway for the rest of the taxi. The taxiway we turn onto is actually designed for aircraft that have landed to vacate the runway and taxi on into the terminal in the reverse direction we're going in, but we're using it to enter the runway. As we taxi on the short turn-off taxiway, you can briefly see the mountains on the north side, as well as the mountains on the western end of the airport that prove that flights can only use airspace on the eastern side of the airport. What a complex scenario this is. We will then taxi down the runway itself to the very end and make a U-turn to align us with runway 10. Those are the runway numbers, and then we'll be able to take off. If the parallel taxiway were not closed, we just take it to the end, turn right, and then take off. I'm happy about this because it gives me more time on the runway itself. We just need to make sure that we get off of the runway before the next plane lands. We'll start our takeoff roll in 1 minute and 15 seconds. Many times when you need to turn around at the end of a runway, there's a turnaround area, but since there already is a taxiway at the end, there's no turnaround, so we'll be making a U-turn on the runway itself. We're nearing the end of 11,146 feet at this 59-year-old airport. The long runway length is necessary for our takeoff with the thin air up here. This will be a takeoff to remember. Once airborne, we'll fly runway heading and will shortly after make a slight right-hand turn to avoid some mountains on the left side. These are not as tall as the mountains on the west side of the airport. Once we reach a certain altitude, we'll turn to the left to the north and then to the west, which is why I'm seated on the left side. The view will be awesome. As we turn around for takeoff, notice the mountain down the runway in the distance that we'll be avoiding by the slight right turn. We're clear for takeoff, so let's turn around and head for Lima.
Tripulación próximos al despegue.
That was a long takeoff roll, and in our slow climb, we look at the neighborhoods on the northeast side of town. The mountains we're looking at on the north side aren't parallel and will interfere with our flight path, so in a few moments, we will make a slight right-hand turn to remain in the valley. We have to stay in the valley for a few more miles before we turn around toward Lima because the mountains that form the valley are just too high to fly over. Remember that we started our climb at 10,860 feet above sea level, so even though it looks like we're close to the ground, our real altitude in MSL is around 11,000 feet at this point. We're approaching the point where humans can't breathe, but of course this plane is pressurized, so that won't be a problem for us. You can see how the higher mountainous areas are treacherous and uninhabitable, not just because of the terrain, but because of the altitude. We're really high above sea level now, but you never know by looking out the window. And most passengers are focused on these stunning mountain views. You have to experience this in real life because filming it just doesn't do it justice. We'll be making a series of left-hand turns around these mountains to bring us toward the opposite direction of takeoff, west. We're following the standard procedure, keeping departing flights to the north of the airport while arriving flights stay on the airport's south side. Again, my seat selection on the left side of the plane was strategic for the mountain views, followed by the city and airport view as we head to the west, but we still have a bit of time before we can safely clear the mountains to make a complete U-turn. When we landed at Cusco, we were able to make a tighter left-hand turn onto the final approach course around a smaller mountain, but we've got some pretty tall peaks on this side, and with our slower than normal climb due to the high altitude, it takes some time to get to a sufficient clearing altitude. We're still in a critical area, making slight turns around the terrain, but we should be in the clear soon. We're now at around 2 minutes past takeoff, and if you just started watching this video at this point, you might think that we just took off since the terrain is still so close to the airplane. Directly below us, we're roughly following the route of Road 35, which extends to the southeast from Cusco. Below is Chochepata, which is a community along the route extending from Cusco. Basically, the way vehicular traffic gets out of Cusco to the southeast is the same way that we're getting out. Both travelers on the land and us in the air are following the valley. Now, for us in the distance, we can see another valley, and that's the valley we'll be over as we climb toward the west. However, by that point, we'll be clear of most of the mountains in the area. I'm looking forward not only to seeing the city as we turn around, but as we turn, I'm going to look to the left and back so I can see the towns in the valley that we just flew over. Alas, the left wing is dipping, and below, we can see the north side of Oropesa, another town in the valley. The view behind reveals Oropesa, Chochepata, and way in the distance, we can see Cusco and the airport's runway. Zooming in reveals the runway, the city, and how there's a mountain at the end of the runway, which is why we made a slight right turn in the initial climb. Check out this view of the valley on the north side. I absolutely love this perspective of a zoom shot of the runway with a mountain in the foreground blocking part of the city. By the way, what looks like two parallel runways is a runway and a road that runs alongside the north side of the airport. Here's the same view zoomed out as we turn toward the west, getting ready to complete the U-turn, and on the left are the towns that we just flew over. We're clear of most of the mountains as we continue our climb. We're now looking to the south as we prepare to head toward the Lima area. Remember, we'll get to our cruising altitude quicker than most flights that originate at sea level. We had the advantage of starting at over 10,000 feet in the sky. We're getting closer to the airport and the city. Just look at how that runway is smack in the middle of it all. I'm glad we're high enough so that the mountain on the city's north end does not block this fantastic view. Another slight turn reveals a community on this side of the mountain. It's at 12,100 feet above sea level. I don't know if I'd be able to handle that, as I didn't feel well 2,000 feet below that. Here's the runway we just took off from. The east side has no parallel taxiway since this part of the airport is used for touching down and lifting off only. We can see the airline terminal with a few planes on the ground getting ready to take off, as well as a plane taxiing out, but this plane will have to wait for an arrival. More on that in a moment, but here's the downtown part of Cusco. I wanted to focus on the city a bit more, but I was distracted by an arrival on a left downwind leg to Cusco. This is the plane that I mentioned earlier that will land after we clear the way. We are on the north side, so this plane can be on the south side, and it needs to make a left-hand turn to land in the opposite direction that we took off from. Then, the plane taxiing out can take off once it lands. I've mentioned it before, but you really need to check out the video I posted for this one, where my arriving flight is doing what you see here, and I'm seated on the left side of the plane to see the city and airport before landing. That plane is in a left turn towards the airport right now. We're now leaving the Cusco area behind and are approaching the higher altitudes. We can see the smaller towns along road number 35 on the western side of the city, like Poroy. We're well positioned to fly toward the Lima area to the northwest at this point. We're now near Urubamba at around 25,000 feet. You'll recall earlier in this video, I spotted planes from the ground around here. I'm pleased to be up here now as I pan the camera down to look at Lake Huayapo. This lake has very clear water and is popular for recreation. What a great departure that was. I got to see everything I wanted to see, as well as an arriving flight, and the great views are going to continue as we fly over the snow-capped mountains of the Peruvian Andes.
Separadas a bordo para su reciclaje. Así el material será aprovechado y utilizado en nuevos procesos. Los invitamos a seguir reciclando en su destino. Muchas gracias. We have been aware of commitment to carefully environment, we inform that all plastic bottles generated on this flight are separated from all for recycling. Thus, the material will be used in new processes. We invite you to continue recycling at your destination. Thank you.
Down there is Huanta, a town of 35,000 people at 8,600 feet above sea level. We're moving along from the Ayacucho region to the Huancavelica region, and down there we see the city of Huancavelica at 12,000 feet. It's another high one. This flight provides such dramatic scenery, and the entire time I was all eyes out the window. What about drink or snack service? No, thank you. I am not letting food or beverages distract me. We're starting on down to Lima, and I can see the Pacific Ocean out there. Way in the distance beyond the Andes, you can see the Pacific Ocean. Lima is a coastal city, so we're getting close to the city by seeing the ocean. We're heading northwest, and the city is in front of the aircraft. As we get lower and lower, it's nice to look down at some of the smaller communities outside of Lima. Today we'll be flying over the ocean, then turning back to the right to land. Our landing runway today will be runway 16 left, which is also being used for departures. Speaking in terms of efficiency, since this runway faces southwest and we're heading northwest, the quickest way to line up with the final approach course would be to keep going the way we're going now and then make a left turn to line up the runway, but that cannot happen since Lima is bordered by mountains on its eastern side. So instead, we'll head to a point just south of the airport, continue out over the ocean, turn right past the airport, then right again to join the final approach course to runway 16 left. While flying south of the airport, we'll be high enough so that we can be above climbing flights that are taking off of runway 16 left. Here in the Lima area, I'm looking out for departures climbing off of runway 16 left. And there goes one now. It's LATAM A320 bound for Tarapoto. We're now out over the Pacific Ocean on a right downwind leg for runway 16 left. There wasn't much to see here as the ocean was covered with clouds, but eventually we made our final turn to the right onto the final approach course as prescribed by the approach controller. How far out we go depends on how many other airplanes there are. There are two streams of traffic approaching runway 16 left. The first are flights from the north that are basically flying straight in towards the approach course, making slight adjustments to join the localizer. The other flights are flights like our flight from the south that need to join the final approach course by making a large right U-turn. I say that we're a flight from the south, even though Cusco is more to the west than the south, but since we flew south of the airport, we're considered to be approaching from the south. There are, of course, flights that did originate in the south. For example, a plane that took off from Santiago, Chile, simply flies north for the entire flight, then turns a right base leg to join the final approach course. If a flight from Santiago is approaching the southern area of the Lima airport, when a flight like ours is approaching from the southwest, the controller needs to work the two aircraft by adjusting speed and heading so they can fit one behind the other. So, for a flight like ours, there are two principal instances where we need to merge with other traffic. The traffic from the south and traffic from the north, and it's up to the controller to fit us in. As we approach the runway localizer, now you can see the reason why we made a right turn onto the final approach course rather than a left turn. The mountains that you see there would be in the way of a more efficient left-hand turn, but the right traffic pattern was efficient and we didn't go very far west of the airport. We did, however, go about 4 minutes to the north. As we join the straight-in final approach course to runway 16 left, you can begin to see the shoreline on the left side of the plane. At one point, we will cross over the shoreline and we'll fly over the land before landing. I flew this exact approach in my video on August 10th, but the ceiling was quite low and I didn't get to see much, so I'm happy I can see the beach and the mountains today. This was filmed during the winter when the weather doesn't tend to be the greatest in terms of visibility. In any case, we are lined up at the runway and are sufficiently spaced between arrivals that have all been lined up. We're about to check in with the control tower for clearance to land. However, clearance won't likely be granted until we're much closer to the runway, since the landing runway is also being used as today's departure runway. Therefore, arriving flights need to have more than minimum spacing so that the tower controller can squeeze in departures between arrivals. Once an arrival touches down, the controller can have a plane that's waiting on the runway's entry taxiway to line up and wait on the runway, providing that the next arrival isn't too close. Once the landing plane sufficiently slows down, the pilot is told to vacate the runway so that the plane waiting in position can get issued takeoff clearance. This is one of the busiest airports in South America, and just like most of the world's airports, unlike Cusco, everyone is moving in the same direction, and there aren't any geographical obstructions right next to the airport, creating odd situations like in Cusco, where departing planes fly right into the path of arriving planes. Of course, Cusco is light on traffic, so that's possible, but Lima is a major airport, so everything is unidirectional. We're following procedures that are followed all over the world. Ahead is the Jorge Chavez International Airport. Jorge Chavez was a Peruvian aviator born in 1887 who participated in aviation competitions in Europe. He died in 1910, and the airport was named for him when it opened 40 years later. The airport is located in the Callao part of Lima, which is to the northwest of the main part of the city, so unfortunately for this approach, we will not get to see downtown Lima. The airport is operated by Lima Airport Partners, which is owned by German company Fraport. I'm happy that the airport is nearly at sea level. With the difficulties that I faced inland in the high altitudes of Cusco, it's going to be a comforting relief to breathe in the open air without having to need any oxygen. This will be a normal landing, and no special actions need to be taken since we're at sea level. Runway 16 left has a length of 11,506 feet, which is really long. Cusco's runway is around the same length, but it's necessary due to the thin air. So why does Lima have such a long runway? First, it's for safety. The longer the runway, the safer it is during an emergency if a plane experiencing issues requires a longer runway. And this airport does host wide-body aircraft that need long runways. From here, heavy jet aircraft are used for long-haul destinations as far away as Madrid or Amsterdam. Heavy aircraft are also used on shorter routes but require less fuel, thus requiring less runway. But the runway is there. There's actually a parallel runway nearly the same length as runway 16 left, but it wasn't in use during my time in Peru. The airport is building a new terminal building on the west side of the runways, but today we'll be using the old terminal, which is on the airport's east side. We'll have a short taxi to the terminal since it's close to runway 16 left.
Muchas gracias por elegir volar con LATAM. Para su seguridad les solicitamos que permanezcan sentados hasta que las señales de cinturones se apaguen. Abra con cuidado los compartimentos superiores, ya que el equipaje pudo haberse movido durante el vuelo, y teniendo la precaución de retirarlo utilizando ambas manos. Al bajar, por favor, asegúrense llevar los artículos personales y de no dejar residuos dentro del avión. Desde ahora pueden usar sus equipos electrónicos solo.
We've made it to Lima after a thrilling and scenic flight from Cusco. The taxi to the parking stand is short as the parking area is very close to the runway. Did I just say parking area and not gate? Yes, I did. Due to limited gates in the terminal, on the ends of the terminal there are remote parking spans, which means that we'll have to deplane by air stairs and take a bus to the terminal to get to bag claim. Do I mind that? Of course not. I love it, and it's a great way to see the LATAM A320 up close. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this very unique flight. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back again very soon with another video. Remember that if you're not a subscriber to this channel, I invite you to click on the subscribe button and hit the bell button, and I'll see you very, very soon. Thanks, everybody.